So please state your name for the record.
Ramsey Kennedy III.
Mr. Kennedy, is it true that you attended Harvard Law School?
Please call me Ramsey. Mr. Kennedy was my father. Yes, ma'am. I attended from 1994 to 1998 and graduated with my JD.
And what do you currently do for a living?
I am an attorney with a private firm in Shreveport, Louisiana. Have been since 2001. I specialize in criminal defense.
And how do you like your job?
Oh, I like my job well enough.
And what made you choose to go into this avenue of employment?
It felt like a way to personally help people individually in a justice system that doesn't always allow for personalized experiences.
So during your time as a practicing attorney, did you ever come in contact with the defendant?
Why, yes, ma'am, I did a few times.
And what was your first encounter with him?
Well, that would have been during the Louisiana State Bar exam. I proctored his exam in the summer of 2019.
Now, is it true that he identified himself as Frankie Williams?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you point out that same man in the courtroom today?
Why, yes, ma'am, he's right over there.
So you met the defendant for the first time in the summer of 2019, and you witnessed him taking the Louisiana State Bar exam. Is that true?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
And the defendant passed the exam?
Yes, ma'am. I wouldn't say he passed with flying colors, but he certainly passed.
So can you explain exactly how the bar exam works for the jury?
Why, yes, ma'am. We may have anywhere from 250 to 300 students come together to take the exam at one time over the course of 2 days. They use laptops and a browser that disables access to other pages or programs. The exam has multiple forms that are staggered between test takers, so no two people sitting next to each other are taking the same exam. Proctors are walking about the room and they monitor and ensure that no cheating takes place.
So there are a lot of steps that take place in order to prevent cheating and to monitor the test takers, correct?
That is correct, ma'am. We have several proctors walking about the room. We also have that application I was telling you about that we use to ensure that they remain solely on this exam.
And while the test is proctored on an application and administrators walk up and down the aisles, you don't check their person before they take the test, do you?
No, ma'am. We take a fingerprint and a picture to ensure identification, but we do not search their person.
You don't check their pockets, their hands, their arms to make sure they wrote down any extra information?
No, ma'am, we do not.
So theoretically, it is possible to cheat on the bar exam.
Well, I suppose so. I've never seen it done before, but I suppose it could happen.
Now, you saw the defendant at a later time after the bar exam, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, I did. We found ourselves in court together for bond and arraignment in September of 2019.
And how did these pretrial hearings go?
Well, to be honest, he seemed a bit sloppy and unprepared. He just didn't fit in the courtroom.
And then you began asking questions about Harvard, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. I had heard he was a Harvard grad, so I thought we'd have something to talk about. I mentioned the professors he should have known if he had gone, and he had seemed very confused, sort of stumbled on his words and made up responses as he went. So to test him, I asked him about a fake professor, you know. He said he really enjoyed their lectures, and I found out he was lying.
You did this because you suspected that he was not a Harvard graduate.
Yes, ma'am.
At any point, did you ever question his capabilities as an attorney?
Why, yes, ma'am, the entire time, quite frankly. He really didn't know what he was doing. He seemed to think he was in some courtroom drama.
What do you mean by courtroom drama?
Well, everything he said was so over the top. He was real loud and dramatic, and nothing he said made sense. He gestured to a jury that wasn't even there.
And after some time, the defendant excused himself during the middle of the meeting. Is that true?
Yes, ma'am. He seemed a bit unsettled during the majority of the hearing. After some time, he excused himself and just didn't come back.
And at this point, did you suspect that he was not a real lawyer?
Yes, ma'am. It had certainly crossed my mind before, but that sort of solidified the suspicion.
And you called Agent Logan to report this, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Once again, can I have you point out the man that identified himself as Frankie Williams?
Yes, ma'am. Right over there.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. No further questions.